now, and then I will introduce Julian. So Julian Reyes is the Climate Hub Fellow at the Southwest Climate Hub. He's originally from the Pacific Northwest and obtained his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Washington State University in 2010. During graduate school, he lived in Germany for a year as a Fulbright research scholar at the University of Bonn. Later, Julian was extremely fortunate to be part of the NSF IGERT Inspire program and an NSF Graduate Research Fellow. His dissertation research focuses on the impact of climate and management in rangelands using an eco-hydrologic model. In addition to this, Julian is also interested in data analysis, visualization techniques, science communication, and science policy. So I'm going to turn it over to Julian to share his presentation. And thank you again for doing this, Julian.
Thanks, Rachel, for that great introduction. Okay, hold on. I need to share the right screen so you don't see all my other stuff. Okay. Can you guys see the presentation?
Yeah, it looks great, Julian.
Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. And again, as Rachel said, this is the first of a series of webinars. First in the webinar series to highlight what's going on in different Climate Hub regions. And I'd like to thank our RMA liaisons, Andrew and Mark. They've been really helpful in answering questions that I have on a weekly basis, and also our director, Emile Elias, for really helping me push this project along. And it's bloomed from what I thought was a simple data analysis project to something that there's a lot of great things that we can do with this. And so I'll start off with the motivation for this. And so the primary motivation of this project falls under the Hub's mission, which most of you know. For the past year, we've been working with our RMA liaisons to better understand how publicly available crop insurance data can be used to assess past climate risk related to causes of loss. And these news articles exemplify the potential causes of loss for crops, such as heat, drought, frost, and freeze. Crop insurance is not an insignificant issue. In 2016, more than $100 billion worth of crops were insured, and $4 billion in indemnities were paid out to farmers. Crop insurance provides a safety net to farmers against potential perils. In a changing climate, farmers' premiums may not be adequate in higher crop production risk areas. And moreover, these higher risk areas may increase the federal government's fiscal exposure. So our guiding question really is, what can crop insurance data tell us about weather and climate impacts on agriculture? Essentially, can we parse out those linkages between indemnities and impacts from perils such as drought? And what do those linkages look like? Ultimately, we hope our project informs future RMA programs, provides regionally relevant information, and leads to possible targeted adaptation in these higher production risk areas. Three major groups play a role in crop insurance: farmers, private insurance companies, and the federal crop insurance corporation will purchase a policy for a given crop and pay a portion of the total premium. The FCIC subsidizes a portion of that premium, which is about 62% on average. Farmers will then receive an indemnity when revenue or production falls below given threshold based on their policy. So given our guiding question, we can couch our objectives in this framework of data visualization and data analysis. Essentially, data analysis is an iterative process. However, it should ultimately be used to clarify the question at hand and help communicate your findings. Our first objective really helps us understand what data exists, how to collect such data, and how to manage a data set for our purposes. Our second objective focuses on the research aspect of this project and helps us investigate trends and correlations. The last objective gets at how do we effectively share this information and produce research that's relevant to our stakeholders. The cause of loss data we're using are publicly available from RMA. The website is located in the bottom left. Each indemnity is associated with a time, place, commodity, insurance plan, and cause of loss. Annual data with cause of loss exists starting from 1948, while monthly data begin in 1989. For this presentation, we use annual data from 2001 to 2016 to be consistent with our trend analysis in Objective 2 because these data include acres affected. First, we take a look at nationwide indemnities aggregated from 2001 to 2016, which totaled almost $100 billion. Here we exclude causes of loss that are revenue-related or area-based. The top 5 causes of loss for the whole nation were drought, excess moisture, hail, heat, and freeze. These comprise over 85% of total indemnities for this time period, and the next 5 causes of loss are cold, wet winters, wind, failure in irrigation supply, hot wind, and flood. We can also look at the top commodities or crops that received an indemnity for this time period. Unsurprisingly, corn, wheat, soybeans, cotton, and grain comprise at least 80% of indemnities. The next 5 commodities represent less than 3% of nationwide indemnities. But these top 10 causes of loss are not evenly distributed across the nation. This figure breaks out the top 10 causes of loss by climate hub region, showing the relative proportion to total regional indemnities from 2001 to 2016. In most areas, drought and excess moisture make up more than 40% of indemnities. However, we can start to see regional differences, especially in the Northwest and Southwest. While drought makes up a large portion of indemnities in the Northwest in this orange bar, the second largest category of cause of loss for the Northwest is other, this light gray bar, of which frost and cold winter comprise most of. In the Southwest, the top cause of loss is failure in irrigation supply, followed by heat. It is interesting to note for the Southwest, the top cause of loss barely breaks 20% of total indemnities. The low fraction values of many causes of loss in the Southwest may be due to the diversity of crops grown in the region. Next, we can look at how specific causes of loss are distributed by region and crop. So for example, we take the heat cause of loss and sum those indemnities by region from 2001 to 2016. Here we can see which crops are most associated with the heat cause of loss by region. While corn is number 1 or 2 in the regional indemnities, there is wide variation in the crops affected by heat by region, indicating the diversity of agricultural production in certain areas. In the Southwest, heat mainly affects fruits and nuts, while wheat is over half of the regional indemnities in the Northwest. So if we select the Southwest region for an example, we can plot the total indemnities from 2001 to 2016 by commodity. While wheat and corn are the top commodity losses, cotton and a variety of fruits and nuts comprise most of the top 15 crops. But we can also show the reported causes of loss by crop. You can see here by the filled colors. For example, the primary cause of loss for wheat is drought, while failure in irrigation supply is mainly responsible for losses in cotton. The Southwest is an interesting case study because of the relative proportion of causes of loss to total indemnities, as shown by this figure on the right. And this shows the fractional indemnities by cause of loss for the Southwest shown in the solid fill color, and the rest of the region shown as opaque. And so we can take these regional data to a finer resolution at the county level. If you recall, over 40% of indemnities from 2001 to 2016 was drought related. However, this county level map shows a different picture of cause of loss, integrating spatial heterogeneity of climate, crops, and socioeconomic factors. So here we plot the top cause of loss by county from 2001 to 2016 using the top 10 nationwide cause of loss as the fill color. Counties with light gray indicate no reports of an indemnity during this time period. The dark gray areas represent a top county cause of loss not represented in the nationwide list. For example, hurricanes and tropical depressions are a top cause of loss in Florida, while plant disease is a top cause of loss in Massachusetts. And so we've looked at aggregated indemnities from 2001 to 2016 over different spatial scales, national, regional, county, but you may ask, how have these causes of loss changed over time? And so this figure shows annual indemnities summed over the whole country in hundreds of millions of dollars. The relative proportion of annual indemnities by the top 10 causes of loss are shown by the filled colors in each bar. And the dotted lines show when the Farm Bill was passed by Congress. And you can see the effects of the major drought in 2012, seen not only by the high absolute Elton was in some sort of drought that year, according to the U.S. Drought Monitor, and moreover, the maximum area that was an extreme or exceptional drought reached 20% that year during the height of the drought. And here we have annual indemnities aggregated over each climate hub region from 2001 to 2016, with the top 10 nationwide causes of loss shown in different colors. It is important to note the y-axes are different for each region respective to that region's total indemnities. The variety of causes of loss comprising annual regional indemnities are related to the predominance of certain crops in the region, or on the flip side, the diversity of crops grown. Causes of loss are not only a function of the crops grown, but also geography, climate, previous agricultural production, and socioeconomic conditions, all of which will vary by region. And there are some other interesting things to note here. Drought as a cause of loss is quite noticeable in each region between 2011 and 2014. The Midwest has the largest range in annual regional indemnities, while the Northeast region has the smallest. Due to the importance of water in the Southwest, the number of irrigated crops, failure in irrigation supply in this light green, unsurprisingly, makes up a large portion of indemnities. And in 2011, hot wind comprised a noticeable portion of indemnities in the Southern Plains in this light pink color. So as you can imagine, there are many ways to slice and dice the data and visualize. And these figures provide only a glimpse into some of our data exploration and visualization activities. Now that we have a better sense of what the data can show us, we now want to describe any possible trends in payments, and if we can somehow link those trends with weather and climate variables. So our second objective really embeds two specific research objectives. First, we want to assess trends in indemnities over time by state, cause of loss, and commodity. Our second specific objective links any increasing or decreasing trends with weather and climate variables. We assess the extent to which short-term weather events and long-term impacts are expressed in indemnities. And so for this presentation, I'm going to focus on the first and show one slide of results for the Southwest. So here we have annual indemnities by state from 2001 to 2016. And for this analysis, we choose the Southwest states as used by the National Climate Assessment. And you can see California and Colorado comprise most of the region's indemnities due to the specialty crops and wheat grown in these areas respectively. Quite noticeable is the sharp increase in indemnities after 2010 during major drought in the region. And you can see California is the light blue, while Colorado is the dark green color. The figure on the right breaks down annual indemnities by different causes of loss. Again, you can see the effect of drought after 2011 with increases in drought, heat, and failure in irrigation supply and the size of the bubbles. So then we can ask the question, are there significant trends in these indemnities, either by state or cause of loss? So to assess any increasing or decreasing trends in indemnities, we use the Mann-Kendall test. This essentially tells us the magnitude and direction of monotonic trends. The Mann-Kendall is well known in trend analysis and has been used in other environmental applications, such as with stream flow and wildfires over time. And so we apply the Mann-Kendall on annual normalized indemnities from 2001 to 2016 by state and cause of loss. And normalization is done by dividing indemnities by acreage to account for changes in policies and/or enrollment numbers. And you can see here the red and blue colors will indicate the direction of the trend, negative and positive respectively, while the shade indicates the strength. Dark gray boxes represent insufficient data points to calculate Mann-Kendall, and the tau values are shown for those trends reported as significant. Oops. So in general, there are increasing trends of normalized indemnities across drought and heat-related causes of loss in most states, as shown by the red shaded colors. The significant trends occur in all Southwest states for failure in irrigation supply. Majority of crops are irrigated in some fashion in the Southwest. So water or lack thereof has and will be an important factor on crop yields. This result is not unexpected and provides confidence in using the Mann-Kendall analyses on these data. It's also important to note that these trends might be dependent on the scale of aggregation of indemnities. We don't show results for normalized indemnities by commodity. However, we did find significant increasing trends for most crops in the Southwest. So our third objective in this project is to provide accessible and discoverable data to our stakeholders and partners. After exploring what data are available and assessing any trends, we need to communicate this to others and eventually receive feedback on all three objectives. And so before I explain the RMA data viewer, it's important to highlight existing RMA tools that exist. First, there are static crop indemnity maps that are available on the RMA website and show absolute values of payments by county, but they don't include cause of loss data. There's also an RMA map viewer, as shown here in the bottom right. However, it also does not include cause of loss data, and it's very specific to different RMA programs. Finally, there is a data portal called the Summary of Business for accessing commodity-specific information. However, it does require further data processing for visualization and analysis. So RMA Your Way. So the data viewer is really to provide on-the-fly information by different spatial units, by county or state, at different temporal resolutions, monthly versus annual, and for different variables of interest. So that can be the cause of loss or the commodity. We enlisted the help of a great computer programmer here at the Jornada, Jeb Williamson, and he's been great in helping us build this from the ground up. And so what I'll do now is I'll take you through a live tour of the website, and if you are at your computer, you can actually access this right now at this website at southwestclimatehub.info/RMA. So if you go to the website, this is so that's the Southwest Climate Hub info website, but this is the RMA data viewer landing page. So you can see that you can either load the viewer right away, you can learn more about what the project is and where the data come from, and you can even take a tour to help explain how to use the tool. But we'll go ahead and just load the viewer right now. And before I go into an example, it's important that we receive feedback from folks and how we can improve the tool. And so there is a link up here, if you can see, it says give feedback. And so if you do try this tool and you see something that's missing or something you like added, please provide us feedback and we'll try to incorporate that. We believe that's a really important aspect of this project. And so you can see here the counties are colored here by the amount of indemnities. And so on the right, you can see how to parse out the data. You can change the different metric you're looking at. You can look at indemnity, you can look at payment count, you can also look at the acreage as reported. You can change the dates. So we're using data from 2001 to 2016, but if you were interested in a particular year, you could select that. So for example, if I wanted 2012 only, I would select 2012 and update. I could also select multiple years using the control button, and I could look at maybe 2010 to 2012. You can also parse out the data by commodities. So if you click commodity, we list the top 5 common options, but also a variety of other options as listed in the data. And you can also parse out the data by causes of loss. So we include the top 10 common ones and also the list of all the rest that are provided. And finally, for the map settings, you can change the different aggregation units. If you wanted to look at the data by state, hopefully this updates. Anyways, you can update it by state. As you can see, all the information is aggregated by state. You can also change the number of classes to display. If you don't want 5, you can have 10. You can change the method that's used to create the classes and then the measurement unit, of course. And so let's say I wanted to look at, so I'm going to go back to county level data. So let's say I was interested in pecans and I wanted to know which counties one had losses in pecans. I can go to commodity, I can scroll down, I can pick pecans, I can update the map, and I can see here as expected, there's a lot of pecans in Georgia and Alabama, but Texas, and also you can see very large indemnities shown by the dark green in southern New Mexico. So I can click on Doña Ana County here if I zoom in, and I can look at and see how much were the total indemnities for this time period. But if I click this little presentation icon, it shows not only the indemnities over time, but it also shows the different causes of loss by that commodity. And if I were also interested in just all the commodities that were reported with the cause of loss in that county, I can unselect the commodity and go back and click Doña Ana County, and I can see that there's also cotton, pecans, cotton, and corn grown in the region, and these are what was reported for causes of loss. And I can see, again, the other causes of loss for those other crops in that region. For another example, let's say I was on the Census of Agriculture website and I found out that Polk County, Minnesota was #1 in sugar beet production in terms of acres. So I can go up here to the Red River Valley and I see Polk County. I can select that, and unsurprisingly, we should see sugar beets. Well, we see sugar beets for in northern North Dakota. But anyways, that's one other example. Another example, we can go to, let's say we wanted to look up tobacco, which is grown down in North Carolina and South Carolina. There's a county called Sampson County. You can see that the #1 commodity for cause of loss is flue-cured tobacco. And it's also #1 for turkeys and hogs and pigs in the nation, if you wanted to know that. But this is just a quick tour of the RMA data viewer. And as you can see, you can do a lot of cool things with this. You can select different counties and find out what crops have reported a cause of loss, what commodities have been reported for loss. And you can look at the data over time, by annually or by month. So for future work, it's important to note that we may include other data layers, such as climate or NAS production data. And eventually, we'd like to offer data downloads with user-defined parameters, such as time period, cause of loss, and commodity. Right now, the data are just available as Excel files, and it basically requires you to have a really powerful computer and a very expert knowledge of Excel to get the data that you want. So we hope that this truly can be on-the-fly information for our stakeholders and partners, so they can just simply plug in the time period, the resolution, temporal, and spatial of the data that they want, and maybe select cause of loss or commodity. And with that, I think I'd like to end the presentation if you have any questions.
Great, thank you, Julian. Are there questions from folks on the line?
Hey, Julian, this is Sarah from the Southeast. Awesome presentation. This is a really cool tool and very relevant for some of the work that some of us other fellows are doing. So I want to pick your brain more detailed later, but I just wanted to ask if you had to do much processing with the RMA data. Like, did you find many errors in it that you had to fix, or was it pretty clean for you to work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so part of that first objective was, I think RMA does a good job of making sure that they explain what the different columns of data are. But there are some things, so, if you were to try to, there are different time periods of which there were available data and not. So for example, acreage wasn't included from pre-2001. And so you would have to do you would need to know some sort of way to put like NA in those rows, for example. So I did have to clean the data a little bit. And with the data, some months aren't reported, some causes of loss aren't reported, some counties aren't reported. And so you need to figure out whether you include those when you aggregate to a state level, or do you include the months that aren't reported, but when you aggregate by annually. So I did have to clean the data a little bit. But they are available for download. If you just click 1 year, I think that data is can be used easily. But once you start putting all the years together, it becomes a little more difficult, and you have to think really hard about what to do with some NA values. So that's a great question.
Hey, Julian, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I apologize for the feedback. I'm en route. This is Steve Astoria. I echo Sarah's comments. It was an outstanding presentation, and kudos to you for really looking at available information out there and trying to find an applicable output for that. But I'm curious, have you thought, or do you already know what you might do in terms of outputs from this or products? Like, if you could comment on that and how you could make some of the analyses and assessments that you've done useful and available for the stakeholders, as you mentioned.
Exactly, that's a great question. Yeah, so related to objective 2, which is a more kind of researchy objective, we definitely will get at least 1 or 2 papers out of this, so that that will be towards the scientific community. And with those trend analyses, that perhaps could be another layer in our data portal showing whether there's an increasing or decreasing trend in indemnities. So that's one way. Another way would be, again, as we said, we can at least provide the raw data to stakeholders in a way that they can actually access, and again, on the fly, just based on what parameters that they want. One way we are providing more regionally relevant or stakeholder relevant information is we're hopefully going to work with the Ogallala CAP folks and extract those data for those counties in the Ogallala Aquifer to see if there are any trends just for those counties. So that's one way. And we're also hoping to work with the RMA, I think they're called the regional offices, and work with them to get our project out there and get some feedback on what they think, and hopefully reach out to commodity groups such as the Pecan Growers Association, maybe an Almond Growers Association, and work through the RMA regional offices to get our research out there. And that's why we really wanted feedback from everyone. That's why we included that feedback form on our website. And so I think the website, the data portal, whatever you want to call it, will really be a place to provide the raw data, but also a place to provide these kind of more of the researchy output as well, in addition to a paper and maybe a report.
Yeah, and Steve, this is Emily. I wanted to jump in here as well. Those, all of those things are things we've talked about, but also we talked about at the outset of this project, there were 3 Climate Hub directors on the committee sort of talking about this at the beginning, and there was a big push for this online data visualization tool to help understand, as we go out to specific counties, what's happening there and what are the major causes of loss and crops as we go out and speak with individual people on the ground. And I see this, there's some enormous targeted adaptation potential conferred by this information and this tool. So we can identify those economically vulnerable crops and those primary causes of loss, and then target the adaptation efforts we do to try to hopefully minimize some of the impacts of weather and climate on people in these areas. So I think the targeted adaptation potential of this tool is pretty enormous across the country.
Yeah, thanks for that, Emily. I would absolutely agree with that, and also with what Julian was outlining. I mean, simple output products that are targeted for effectively farm advisors, right? So that they could help growers and producers make better decisions in the face of these types of stressors. So like you said, so you're really crafting the key for the lock would be enormously beneficial, I think. So yeah, that's great. I'm excited for this. I thought it was outstanding, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes.
So we have a question.
Hi, this is Sharon.
Oh, go ahead, Sharon. Sorry.
I just wanted to know what the website was again. I put in the Southwest Hub, Climate Hub, but I wasn't successful at pulling up the RMA part.
Okay, it's swclimatehub.info/RMA. I hope you can see my screen still. It's right here on the bottom.
Got it. Thank you.
I wanted to, Clay asked the question in the comment box. His question was, is there any way to look at insurance payouts in a county versus premiums collected from producers in the county? And Clay's simple answer, yes. More complicated answer is that I would say that there are a lot of different data products available through RMA, and the data product that we're using does not have those premiums included as a particular column. And so what a part of this objective 1, which is exploration of the data, was really understanding what these different data products offer. And so Mark and Andrew have been really great in answering my questions and figuring out which data do we use. And so we can look at those, but I think there are advantages and disadvantages to using each of these data products. So one would be maybe you lose the temporal resolution of monthly data. Another one could be, you have data from 1948, but it doesn't have one column of data. But that would be a next step also on the more research objective, is to start looking at the loss ratio, which is the indemnity over the total premium. And so, yes, it's a long answer. So, long story short, yes.
Other questions for Julian?
And then there's one in the box by Sarah, any interest in adding FSA indemnity data to the viewer? And that's also a short answer, yes. And so I know Nora and I have been talking, and Nora is hopefully going to provide us some Puerto Rico data to include. But she's also been working with FSA. And so I think eventually we'd like to include those data if we can, because yeah, there are some counties obviously that are maybe underreported because some of those crops are not insured through RMA. But right now we're focusing on RMA for now and hope to add FSA eventually.
Hey, this is Clay Pope. I went ahead and got on the phone. I do have a question, kind of following up as a dovetail to the one that I typed in. As you're working with the Ogallala cap, a thought came to mind. Is there any way, and I don't know if this data, how easily accessible it would be and how it plug into the product you've got here, but looking at land treatment practices and trends on loss. And I was thinking especially on limited irrigation, irrigation factors, looking at, say, no-till and cover crops versus conventional till, both under irrigation in that Ogallala aquifer, if there was any noticeable differences as far as premiums based on the land treatment practices that the producers were using. Is that something you thought about, and is that something that potentially could be rolled into this some way?
That's a great question, Clay, and that could be rolled in. As long as I can get data on the land treatment practices by county, if there's some way to extract that, we can easily compare those trends in indemnities, perhaps by those different land treatment practices, the same way that we're comparing indemnities over time by county, by state, whatever aggregation unit with climate data. So if that's possible, then yeah, that would be really interesting to look at, to see if there were any trends between those two, the land practices and the indemnities, or the premiums at least too.
That's something Julian, we ought to visit, how to get into the Ogallala a little bit, but we'll talk later.
Okay, thank you.
Julian, Dennis here. One question, one comment. Did you detrend your dollar amounts when you did your analysis? Your dollar.
So we initially thought about doing some sort of looking at deflating them, but we didn't really find a significant decrease in the trends that we were seeing. So instead, what we did was we normalized by dividing by acreage. That's what we did for the trend analysis. And for the trend analysis, not only will we try to use the normalized indemnities, we might also do the loss ratio, so the indemnities per premium. Because I think you're getting at whether there's an effect due to perhaps the farm bill and different enrollment. We thought about that for a while, and at least for a first case study, we thought we could just
by 20. So for that. Have to be careful of when we're just. And it's what might have short. So that.
Sorry,
but in the shades of green represent the price, I think.
I'm ahead.
Okay.
I apologize. Other questions, Julian? It's been really.
I knew there were sugar beets in Polk County. I guess I didn't change the data. Sorry, guys. That was one example. But yeah, so there are sugar beets in Polk County. So sorry, just wanted to check.
And maybe before I got back on, did you answer Kara's question in the chat?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Well, no further questions? Well, in that case, thank you, Julian, and Lee, for your talk on this, and thanks to Mark Shilts and Andrew Eichens, our RMA liaisons. Great to share. So please don't hesitate to contact me or Julian, or if you have questions or concerns. Thank you all for attending. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thank you. It was
everyone.
wonderful.
Yep.